My name is Aman. I was born in the shadow of a secret. Long before I ever saw the sun, I saw pages, thousands of them, fluttering in candlelight like birds in a cage. My first memories aren't of lullabies or a mother's touch. They're of parchment older than bone of ink that shimmered when you dared to read it aloud, of voices that whispered from between the cracks of every stone wall in the tunnels beneath Alexandria. They called it a library, but even as a child I knew that wasn't the right word. Libraries are places of knowledge, light, preservation. But what I was born into, it was something else, something older, something hungry. They say the great Library of Alexandria was destroyed by fire. The Julius Caesar siege in 48 BCE, or perhaps a later religious conquest, reduced it all to ash. And maybe that's true of the parts they were allowed to know. But there was another part, a deeper chamber never listed on maps. Not built for public learning, but for hiding the kind of knowledge that could unmake a mind, or worse, awaken it. That's where I lived, that's where I was raised, and this is the story I was never meant to tell. The first time I realized the danger, I was 6. An elder scholar robed in ochre and silence handed me a scroll and said only, "Do not open unless you've forgotten your name." I laughed, thought it was a riddle. I opened it that night. What spilled out was not words but memory. Not mine, but someone else's. I saw visions of a desert that breathed of stars falling like raindrops, of creatures with more eyes than limbs. And when I looked in the mirror the next morning, I didn't recognize my own face. They told me I had been chosen, but I think I had been cursed. This hidden library, this forbidden heart beneath Alexandria, was older than the city itself. Carved from bedrock, laced with veins of quartz and lapis, it pulsed with the energy of something not entirely of this world. The elders said it was the true foundation of Alexandria. That Ptolemy I built above it, not to protect it, but to bury it under the weight of civilization. And yet, it breathed. Even buried, it breathed. There were rooms no one entered, doors no one touched, books bound in skin that screamed if opened, a vault that trembled during eclipses, and a chamber where time moved in circles, not lines. Once I watched a man walk into that room. He left when I was 13. He had only just entered the day before. What kind of place warps time? What kind of knowledge insists on being forgotten? The scholars who lived down there, if you could call them that, were not like the priests of Isis or the philosophers of the museum. They didn't seek to understand the world. They sought to contain it. Every scroll sealed was a cage. Every book locked away was a weapon never fired. They believed they were protectors. But sometimes, late at night, I could hear them weep. What were they hiding, or worse? What had they read? They taught me languages not spoken on Earth. They showed me maps of continents that had no sea to touch them. One taught me how to fold light, another how to extract memory from stone. By 12, I no longer feared ghosts. By 14, I had become one. But there was one thing: I was never allowed to see the Codex of No Names. It was said to be kept in the deepest vault, behind 7 doors each, inscribed with a different tongue, none of them human. It was said that to read it was to remember lives that weren't yours. Whole civilizations forgotten by the world, erased, not by fire or war, but by intent. One night, a scholar tried to open it. He screamed before the key even turned. The next day, there was no trace of him. Not even a name on the roster. Only a burned shadow on the stone. Still, I wanted to know. And that desire, more than anything, is what damned me. Because I am the last. The others are gone. The tunnels are sealed, the scrolls dust. But I remember. And now, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I must tell this story. Not because I want to, but because someone somewhere has begun to dig. They are close. Too close. And if they find what we buried, then history as we know it will become myth. And the myth will become the only truth left. Let me show you what we tried to forget. They say fire is a purifier. But that night in Alexandria, fire became something else entirely. An editor of truth, a sculptor of memory, and perhaps a liar. I was 12 the night the flames came. It began with a tremor. Not from the earth, but from the air. A ripple, like a held breath, finally exhaled. The oil lamps dimmed. The torches flickered unnaturally. And then, the screaming started. We had always known the day would come. The elders called it the reckoning, a time when what was buried would either rise or burn. They didn't know which was worse. Some said Caesar's fleet had accidentally caused it with a stray spark. Others whispered that someone inside had opened what should have stayed closed. That night I heard both possibilities echo down the marble hall's flames above, and something ancient stirring below. I ran through corridors I had memorized like veins. Every hallway smelled of ink and old paper, but now smoke curled through the cracks in the stone. It was not the hot smoke of a wood fire, but cold, acrid like parchment weeping. The fire didn't roar, it hissed. Above us, the city panicked. Soldiers shouted, civilians ran, and history burned. But down where I lived in the hidden library, it was quiet. Too quiet. Until we heard the books begin to scream. Yes, scream. They were not alive in the way you and I are. But they remembered. And when the fire reached the air above us, the memory of burning returned to them. You could hear it echoing through the vaults like the cries of orphaned gods. One of the scholars, Father Menace, grabbed my arm and hissed, "We only save what's cursed." I didn't understand what he meant. Blessings survive on their own, he added. But the cursed ones, they will resist the fire. He handed me a satchel and pointed to the chamber of binding. I hesitated. He slapped me now. I ran inside the chamber. The walls were already hot to the touch. Runes on the floor glowed a deep violet, pulsing with warning. In the center, 3 books levitated in place, held by forces not visible to the eye. One hissed when I reached for it. Another whispered a name I hadn't heard in years. The third was silent. I took the silent one. The flames began to descend the spiral staircase, but they moved. Wrong. They clung to the ceiling, crept across the walls as if searching. Fire guided by thought, or by hunger. I raced back, clutching the book to my chest, but the heat didn't come from the fire anymore. It came from within the pages. The book was cold to the touch, but hot to the soul. I felt my thoughts shift. Memories, not mine again. This time of ships with wings, towers that touched stars, and languages carved into light itself. By the time I returned, the others were gone. Only Father Menace remained, his face burned not by flame, but by knowledge. His eyes were wide, staring into something I couldn't see. "You must take it," he rasped. "Where?" I asked. He smiled. "Away." Then he collapsed, not like a man falling, but like a puppet whose strings had been cut. I dragged him into the vault, laid him on the cold floor beside the altar of Thoth. The statue wept gold that night. I saw it. As I sealed the vault, I looked back only once. The flames had reached the outer halls now, but stopped short at the stone. They could not pass. The cursed protected themselves. And in the morning, when the city wept for what was lost, I remained silent. They built myths around the fire. They said it was an accident. They said we lost everything. But I know better. We lost only what was allowed to be lost. The rest survived, buried, hidden, waiting. Some of those scrolls weren't burned. They escaped. Others traveled across sand and sea, carried by hands that knew what they held. The cursed books can't die. They choose new readers, sometimes even centuries later. And that night, when I stared into the mirror with ash-stained skin, I saw not myself, but a line of keepers stretching back beyond kings and pharaohs. I was 12, and I had become the new librarian. The Codex of No Names was safe, but its silence was beginning to fade. Even now, I can hear it turning pages in the dark. Even now I wonder, did we save the world from the book, or the book from the world? They weren't meant to be read. That was the first rule of the Forbidden Scrolls. Not because they were dangerous, though they were, but because the scrolls didn't want to be known. Some knowledge has a will of its own, and the scrolls we kept in the Chamber of Ashes, they resisted the light. I remember the first time I tried to open one. I had just turned 14. The last of the fire's ashes had settled across the vault floor like snowfall. Most of the surviving scholars were gone, taken by flame or memory or something worse. And I had inherited a burden far too old for my young hands. There were hundreds of scrolls, locked behind a rotating stone wall. each inscribed with different protective glyphs, some glowing faintly, others flickering as if disturbed by invisible winds. Each scroll had a name, but not a title. No summaries, no tables of content, only warnings. Some were carved into the bone cases that held them. Others whispered themselves as you drew near. One in particular drew my attention, a long, dark scroll, bound with a clasp of silver, carved into the shape of an open eye. It was labeled only with a single phrase: "To know, this is to be remembered." Not to remember, but to be remembered. Even then, I didn't fully understand what that meant. I brought the scroll to the central table and laid it across the stone. The moment I touched the clasp, I felt something shift. The temperature dropped. The torches dimmed. Somewhere deep in the library, I heard a door creak open, though I knew no one else was left. When I broke the seal, the parchment unrolled itself. What lay inside was no ordinary text. The words glowed softly red, and gold and blue weaving like threads across the page. They didn't sit in lines. They danced. And when I stared long enough, they began to move, not across the parchment, but inside my mind. I saw a man walking backward through time, unaging, until he dissolved into stardust. I saw an empire built on the back of a serpent the size of a continent. I saw a queen with no face signing treaties in blood. And then I saw myself, older, taller, eyes hollow, reading that same scroll in a room that no longer existed. I screamed. I couldn't stop the vision. It kept coming. When it finally ended, the scroll had rolled itself back up. My nose was bleeding. My hands were trembling. I had no memory of how much time had passed. And worse, I was no longer alone. A shadow lingered in the doorway. Not a person. Not quite. A figure shaped like smoke and silence, watching me. It didn't speak, but I felt it. A presence etched into my soul like a second name. That was the cost. To read the forbidden scrolls was to invite their memory into you. You didn't just learn their secrets, you became part of them. A living page, a moving archive. The elders had never explained it to me in words. But I understood then why they had aged so quickly, why their minds wandered, why some would wake up screaming in languages no one else remembered. The scrolls were not dead things. They were hosts, and each one came from somewhere, some forgotten ritual. Some lost people, some deal struck in the dark. Over the next year, I began to study them one by one. I didn't read them all, only the ones that called to me. One scroll sang when it was opened, a soft melody in a scale no human voice could follow. I hummed it once, and my dreams became endless deserts with doors in the sand. Another scroll contained no words, only images, drawings of stars, of bones, of vast cities built within the skeletons of creatures so large they bent the horizon. It left a burn on my palm that has never faded. But the worst scroll, it didn't even need to be opened. Just holding it made your ears ring, your mouth dry, your skin crawl. Its name was etched in fire on its case, The Path Without End. No one had read it, no one should, but I kept it. Wrapped it in cloth soaked with salt and iron, buried it beneath the statue of the jackal-headed priest in the Hall of Names. Because even forbidden things deserve guardians. And that's what I had become. Not a librarian, not really. I was now something more ancient. A watcher of scrolls. A keeper of memories that had no origin. A vessel of stories that wanted to be forgotten. I kept notes, of course. Scrawled thoughts in my own code hidden beneath false shelves. But even those began to warp. Once I found a page I had written the day before now, rewritten in a dialect I didn't recognize. Another time, my own handwriting responded to me, answered a question I hadn't yet asked. The library was alive, and I was its beating heart. But I began to fear that some of the scrolls were waking. Not just glowing or whispering, dreaming. And what do? When the knowledge you're supposed to protect wants to escape? The desert is not silent. People say it is a place of stillness, of death, of nothing but wind and time. But those of us who have lived beneath it know better. The sand speaks, not with words, not in any tongue known to man, but it whispers. It sifts secrets through your hair when you walk alone. It presses memory into your skin with every gust. And if you listen, truly listen, you'll hear something older than language, older than bone. You'll hear the vault. I didn't discover it by accident. No, the vault called me. After years in the ruined remains of the hidden library, I began to dream of staircases made of sand, of whispers rising through the stone beneath my feet. I would wake with the taste of salt and iron in my mouth as though I had licked old tomb walls in my sleep. At first, I dismissed it as the scrolls playing tricks on me. They often did. But then, one night, I found a map I had never drawn. It was folded beneath my cot, written in ash and starlight. A coastline I knew, the shores of Alexandria, but marked with a series of pulsing glyphs I didn't recognize. When I traced them with my fingers, I heard a voice, faint, in the back of my skull, like breath on stone. Below the memory of kings, beneath the teeth of Anubis, lies the vault that remembers when the world was soft. I didn't sleep after that. I followed the map. It took me beyond the ruins of Alexandria, beyond the monuments and temples, into the desert where the winds carved hieroglyphs into the dunes. Days passed. My water ran low. My breath grew shallow. And then I saw it, half buried in sand, a statue of Anubis, its jaw cracked open, as if mid-scream, its paws, resting atop a stone disc, etched with spirals. The air around it shimmered. The wind refused to cross the threshold. I could feel the pressure change in my ears. This was no tomb. This was an entrance. I cleared away the sand with my bare hands. Hours passed, blood mixed with dust. Finally, I uncovered the disc fully and it pulsed. A low hum, a vibration in my bones. I pressed my palm to its center, and the earth opened. The disc cracked in perfect circles, revealing a spiraling staircase descending into lightless stone. As I stepped onto it, I felt the temperature drop. The sound of the wind vanished. What replaced it was breathing, not mine. I lit a torch and began to descend. The walls were carved not with words, but with sound. I could feel it in the stone vibrations, etched rhythms, shapes that made my spine shudder. The deeper I went, the more the air thickened. Not with dust, but with presence. I reached a chamber, vast, dome-shaped, lit not by fire, but by veins of glowing crystal, pulsing through the walls like blood vessels. At its center stood a slab of obsidian, and above it, a floating stone inscribed with thousands of tiny shifting letters. But it was the walls that stole my breath. Murals older than the pyramids showed beings not quite human, with avian heads, elongated limbs, eyes like suns. They offered scrolls to kneeling men. They pointed to stars. They opened doors inside mountains, and behind them, a great vault door, shaped like an eye split in the middle by a tongue of flame. Then a voice, not a whisper this time, but a chorus. 100,000 voices layered into one. It came from behind the murals, from the very stone. "You have come too early," I froze. "You are not ready for what I asked." The stone beneath me pulsed. To remember. Images exploded behind my eyes. A time before language, before empires. A world soft with infancy. Creatures that walked between thoughts. Cities built from memory. A pact made between humanity and something other. A deal to forget in exchange for survival. The vault was the failsafe, a place to hold what couldn't be destroyed. Not knowledge, but reminders. Of who we once were, of what we once knew. And now, it was stirring, because something above had remembered. The voice faded, the chamber stilled. I looked down and realized I was holding a scroll I hadn't brought with me. It was warm. Its seal was broken, and its title, not written in any tongue I knew, but I understood it. The First Promise. I didn't know what it meant, not yet, but I knew. This vault beneath the sand was only the beginning. There were others. Other vaults. Other whispers. Other memories sleeping just beneath the skin of the world. And they were beginning to wake. We called ourselves librarians, but that word was a veil. It sounded simple, scholarly, benign. A keeper of books. A guardian of knowledge. But the truth was far older, far darker. We were not merely custodians of scrolls. We were the last living members of a sect bound to protect the memory of a world that had chosen to forget itself. The sect of the last librarians. That's what the elders called us in the older texts, the ones written in water on stone and blood on bark. We did not choose this title, it chose us. In every generation a few were called. Not by decree, not by lineage, but by the books themselves. The forbidden scrolls whispered in dreams. They bled images into minds. They stirred old songs in forgotten tongues. And if the chosen answered, the scrolls listened. I was the last to be chosen, or so I believed. Before the fire, before the vault, there had been others. Dozens, perhaps hundreds over the centuries. Most had vanished into legend names etched into the walls of the Chamber of Echoes. I often traced those names with my fingers, wondering what they had seen, what they had buried, what they had survived. But not all of them were gone. Deep beneath the ruins of the upper archives, hidden behind a false wall of marble and myth, lay a room known only as the Circle of Dust. I found it by accident, or maybe not. Nothing is accidental in Alexandria. A falling stone revealed a crack. The crack revealed a symbol, and the symbol responded to blood, mine. When I pressed my palm against it, the wall sighed open, revealing a circular chamber. Dust hung thick like mist, and the air was heavy with the weight of memory. In the center stood a circle of stone chairs, 12 in total. Most were empty, but not all. 3 figures sat cloaked in shadows, their faces hidden behind bone-white masks. They did not speak. They simply watched as I entered. I wanted to run, I didn't. Instead, I bowed an instinct, not a decision. One of them nodded. Another raised a hand, and the third beckoned. I stepped forward. "Why now?" I asked. The one on the left spoke, voice like crumbling parchment. "Because memory is waking." The one on the right added, "Because one has opened the vault." The one in the center removed their mask. An old woman, eyes like storm glass, skin etched with inked patterns, maps perhaps, or curses. Her voice was soft, but it silenced everything else. Because you are the last." They told me of the pact, of how, after the great forgetting, the world was remade. Kingdoms rose without knowing what had come before. Religions bloomed in soil fertilized by lies. And above all, humanity was kept safe from what it once knew by ignorance. But knowledge leaks. And when it does, we the librarians were tasked to seal the cracks. We performed rituals that erased memories from entire cities. We buried scrolls beneath burning temples. We whispered counter-stories into the ears of kings. Not to control the world, but to keep it from awakening what slept beneath it. We were not saviors, we were censors. Necessary, silent, alone. And now the cracks were widening. The scrolls were waking on their own. Vaults were whispering to the wind, and somewhere others were listening. Not just humans. Things we had forgotten how to fear. I asked what I was meant to do. The woman handed me a scroll, bound in serpent skin. Its seal was broken. Its title simply read, "The Last Reading." "You will not survive it," she said, "but you will become something that can." I took it. That night, I returned to the ruined chamber where I had first found the Codex of No Names. I placed the new scroll beside it and waited. For hours, nothing happened. Then motion. The Codex unrolled itself. The serpent scroll hissed open. And between them, a shape began to form. Not of this world, not of any. A silhouette woven of script and silence. No face, no form, only presence. It spoke, not aloud but in thought. "You keep what was hidden. You guard what was cursed. But do you remember what was promised?" I didn't. I asked, "Who are you?" Its answer was simple. "I am what comes after librarians." Then it vanished. The scrolls burned to ash, and I was left with only a mark across my chest where the Codex had hovered. A spiral within a spiral. Endless. The librarians did not speak to me again. The next day, I returned to the Circle of Dust. It was empty. Only the dust remained swirling slowly, forming words I dared not read. I was alone again. But now, I was something else. Not just a librarian. Not just a watcher. I had become a bridge, and the things on the other side were beginning to cross. They were called the Vanished. In every generation of the sect, there were those who crossed a line, who opened a scroll they were warned against, who sought knowledge not meant to be known. They didn't die, at least not in any way we understood death. They simply stopped being seen. No bodies, no screams, no signs of struggle. Only an open scroll. A faint scent of smoke. And the air humming like something had just passed through it. At first, the elders whispered that these readers had been taken. But as I grew older, I learned the truth was more complicated. They weren't taken, they were translated. I first encountered the phenomenon when I was 16. A scribe named Aman had spent weeks obsessed with a particular scroll. It wasn't even one of the forbidden ones, just an odd, flickering text, written in 3 dialects we couldn't identify. He insisted the scroll sang to him. He would sit with it for hours, not speaking, barely eating, letting the words move across the page as though they were alive. One morning, I found his chamber empty, his bed untouched, his notes burned to ash. The scroll lay on the floor, unrolled and glowing. I touched it, and I heard him, not with my ears, but in my blood. A resonance like a tuning fork vibrating through my bones. His name echoed in the space behind my thoughts. He was in the scroll. Somehow his essence had been absorbed or perhaps exchanged. Whatever he had read had not been content to be known. It had demanded more. A bond. A union. From that day forward, I began to track the disappearances. There were dozens. Some were marked in our records. Most were not. The sect had erased many of them, even from our own history, because what they had read and what they had become frightened even the keepers. There were patterns. Every scroll that led to disappearance shared one trait: they were unfinished. Fragments, half-stories, prophecies written in reverse, songs with no final note. The human mind, they believed, tried to complete them, to resolve the meaning, to find the ending. But in doing so, the reader became the ending. They filled the empty space, and in return, the scroll rewrote them. I found one such scroll myself, hidden behind a collapsed pillar in the Hall of Echoes, wrapped in wax cloth and tied with hair. Its title read, "Letha Remembers." I opened it just briefly. Inside were only 4 lines. I drank the waters that forget, and now I speak with names that aren't my own. To read this is to drown. To finish this is to become the water. I closed it instantly, but something remained. A word I didn't know kept echoing in my mind. Sailthun. I whispered it aloud once, and for a moment I forgot my name. The feeling passed, but I knew then I had come close to vanishing. Some of the elders believed the vanished had become part of the scrolls, that when we read, we weren't just absorbing stories. We were walking paths others had walked, and if we stepped in exactly the same place for too long, we were pulled into the pattern. They showed me a room deep beneath the vault where scrolls hung like vines from the ceiling. Hundreds of them. Each one whispered when I passed. Some whispered my name. Others whispered names I didn't know but somehow mourned. And the worst of them were warm, as if someone had only just finished reading. There was one scroll, however, that terrified even the elders. It had no name, no language, no markings, just a blank sheet of parchment that glowed softly in the dark. No one who had read it had ever returned. They had tried to destroy it. Fire did nothing. Water soaked it but did not warp it. They buried it in salt and iron, even beneath the floor of the tomb of a forgotten king. It returned. Always it returned. I asked why we didn't seal it away. The answer, because it was never opened. It opens itself. That night I dreamed of the vanished. They walked through a library that had no end between bookshelves, that stretched into the stars. Their eyes were blank, glowing faintly, their hands trailing script behind them like smoke. They didn't speak, but I understood. They were still reading. And they would never stop. They had become vessels of story pages bound in memory. Not dead, not alive, just readable. I woke with tears on my face, and I knew deep down that the deeper I went into the library's secrets, the closer I came to becoming one of them. But I couldn't stop, because the next scroll I found bore no warning. Only a single sentence. "If you are reading this, then we are not alone anymore." It pulsed in my hands, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the vault, I heard footsteps. Not mine. Not human. The vanished were moving again, and something was reading them. It was never meant to be opened. That's what the elder inscription said. The Book of Beasts had no true title, not one that could be spoken aloud. The cover was bound in scaled hide, tougher than stone, pulsing faintly as though it breathed. Chains wrapped around it, etched with symbols from at least 10 dead civilizations. But it called to me. For days I ignored it. Walked past the pedestal where it sat, always cold, always still. But something shifted when I passed. The air thickened, the torches flickered, and once I swear I heard a low growl, as if something within the book dreamed restlessly. I should have left it alone. But curiosity is its own kind of curse. When I finally touched the chains, they slithered away, not unlocked, but willing. As though the book had been waiting. The moment I opened it, the world shifted. There were no words inside, only illustrations, inked in blood and bone. Each page bore the image of a creature, some familiar, most utterly alien. Not drawn, but imprinted. Living memories pressed into parchment. The first was a serpent with wings made of mirrors. Its eyes were closed, but as I turned the page, I saw them open in the next image. The second was a thing made of teeth and time, no body, just a shape carved into hunger itself. The third looked like me, but older, wounded, standing before a doorway of stars with claw marks across my chest. I tried to close the book. I couldn't. My hands would not obey. Instead, I kept turning. With each page, I felt something shift in the room. The air grew colder. The walls flexed like lungs, and shadows deepened into forms. I wasn't alone anymore. I looked up, and the chamber was gone. I stood in a forest of bone and crystal beneath a sky with no stars. Above me, things floated, creatures stitched from storms, and sorrow watching with ancient hunger. Below me, the ground pulsed with text, living language, swirling like mist. The book was a gate, not metaphorically, literally. Each illustration was a key, a portal to a realm where that creature lived. Not fiction, not imagination, but truth, raw and unfiltered. This was why the book had been sealed. It did not describe monsters, it connected to them. Beasts from before the first sunrise, from timelines that had collapsed, from dreams that had been abandoned halfway through. One turned toward me. It had no eyes, only mouths, dozens of them, each one whispering a language I almost understood. And when I tried to look away, I found myself staring at a new page. The creature was drawn there, waiting, and I understood if I looked long enough, it would step through. The book was not just a gate. It was a mirror, reflecting back the horrors we buried within the collective memory of humanity. It remembered every myth, every nightmare, every bedtime monster we swore didn't exist. Because they had, because they still do. And this book remembered them all. I closed my eyes, spoke a word I didn't know I knew, and the world folded. When I awoke, I was back in the vault. The book lay closed before me, but something had changed. A single page was missing, torn out, and in its place, resting on the stone pedestal, was a single feather. Not from any bird I knew. It shimmered in colors I didn't have words for. It was warm, heavy, and pulsing like a heartbeat. I locked the book again, sealed the chamber with salt iron, and 3 languages I barely understood. But I knew it wouldn't hold forever, because that feather was watching me, not metaphorically, I mean literally. When I turned my back, I could feel it, a soft pressure like a stare. When I moved it to another room, it returned to the pedestal, always upright, always quiet, always patient. Something had crossed over. Not a beast, not yet, but a signal, a piece of the other side. And now, the book was listening. Sometimes I still hear it whispering at night, scraping softly inside the stone, waiting for me to return, waiting for me to turn one more page. But I won't, because I saw what comes next. The final page wasn't drawn yet, and I fear that's because it's mine. The Sphinx is not just a statue. That's what I learned when I crossed the boundary of the lower vault into the chamber. None of the elders dared enter. They called it the Room of Echoes. But what echoed there was not sound. It was language, and it had a guardian. The first time I saw it, I mistook it for stone. A massive figure, leonine body curled beneath a human-like face, cracked and weathered by time. But then it moved, not its body but its eyes. They opened, and everything I knew about the world changed. The Sphinx was watching. Not just me, not just the room, but every word I had ever spoken, every word ever written, every word ever thought. Because the Sphinx was not a creature of flesh or spirit, it was the memory of language. It existed not in time, but in meaning. It had been carved, shaped, and reshaped across civilizations. Egypt, Greece, Persia, India. But the form was just a vessel. The truth of the Sphinx was deeper. It was a guardian of the lost words, not forgotten words. Lost words that once shaped mountains, bent rivers, stitched wounds, and called stars from the sky. Words that had meaning beyond thought. Words that could not be translated, only experienced. And I had found them. I don't know if it was the Book of Beasts or the Vault's awakening, but something had stirred the Sphinx. It turned its gaze toward me, and I fell to my knees, not from fear, but from weight. The sheer gravity of being seen by something so ancient, so sacred. It spoke, but not with a mouth. Its voice came through the walls, the floor, the blood in my veins. Not a sound, but a concept, like a word that existed behind all languages. "You have come bearing names," it said, "but left yours behind." I didn't understand, until I realized I no longer remembered my birth name. Not fully, only fragments. Alex among something in between. The scrolls had replaced it piece by piece. The Sphinx leaned down, its shadow consuming me. "Then you are ready." A panel opened in the floor, and from it rose a stone tablet. No symbols, just presence. The lost word. Not a word in any tongue, but a seed. I could feel it even before I touched it. It wanted to bloom, to be spoken, to be released. But the Sphinx stopped me. To speak the word is to rewrite what was silenced, to awaken what sleeps beneath the silence. Are you willing to remember everything the world chose to forget? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure, but my hand moved anyway. And the moment my fingers brushed the stone, everything changed. The world cracked. Not literally, not physically, but in perception. I saw history not as a line, but as a spiral. I saw the great fires not as accidents, but as rituals. I saw the Library of Alexandria not as a casualty of war, but as a vault sealed from the inside. We didn't lose knowledge. We buried it. The Sphinx showed me why. There were words too heavy to carry, truths too sharp to survive. Knowledge that once known made the world unlivable, so we let it go. We forgot. The lost word had been spoken once before, and it had shattered a city. A place now erased from maps, swallowed by sand and sea. Not Atlantis, older, a city without name. Its ruins hidden beneath silence. The word had been carved into its center, and when it was spoken, every inhabitant disappeared instantly. Not dead, just removed. From memory, from time, from language itself. Even now, no one recalls it, not even the Sphinx. Only the echo remains. That is what you risk. It told me. Speak it again, and the forgetting will end. And suddenly, I understood the choice. I could bring the truth back, reignite what had been buried, restore the words that healed and destroyed alike. Or I could walk away, forget the scrolls, the vault, the echoes, let the world sleep. But I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unknow the truth. And the word it pulsed in my chest now like a second heart. I looked up at the Sphinx. What happens if I keep it silent? Its answer chilled me. Then you will become its guardian. I would become like it. A memory made flesh. A watcher of words that must not be spoken. A soul shaped like a question no one dares ask. The Sphinx began to fade. Not vanish, but withdraw like mist retreating from the shore. And the tablet sank once more. But the word remained. Inside me, I left the chamber. But I am not what I was. Every sentence I hear now vibrates differently. Every lie tastes bitter. Every truth sings. And sometimes when I'm alone, I hear the word trying to rise, climbing my throat, seeking escape. But I do not let it pass. Because I know what it will do. And I am not ready to end forgetting just yet. Not until I know who or what might be waiting to remember. They called it the reader's curse. A quiet madness that spread not by contagion, but by comprehension. No one screamed, no one bled. They simply changed. It began slowly. A word misremembered. A phrase spoken backward. A name forgotten even if it was your own. Then came the dreams. Not nightmares, those can be escaped. No, these dreams clung to the waking mind. You'd see doors that weren't there. Hear conversations no one was having. Read books that didn't exist. Until you looked for them and found them. It happened to the elders. It happened to the scribes. And now, it was happening to me. I didn't know when it began. Perhaps it was the vault, or the Sphinx, or the Book of Beasts. Or perhaps just time. Because the longer you carried the forbidden, the more it carried you. One morning I awoke with a scroll in my hand, one I had never seen before. Its title was The Things I've Never Said. I unrolled it. Inside were my thoughts, not from yesterday, not from last week, but from moments I hadn't yet lived, words I hadn't yet spoken, feelings I hadn't yet felt. It was a record of my future memory. I laughed. Then I wept. Then I laughed again because the scroll predicted that I would. That was the first fracture. After that, things accelerated. I began hearing voices in written text, not figuratively. I would open a book and hear it read itself, each sentence in a different voice. Some familiar, some not. The whispers grew louder at night. One voice in particular returned again and again. It spoke in a dialect older than breath. But I understood it, not because I knew the language, but because the meaning bypassed comprehension. You are becoming a library, it said. A walking vault. And I realized this was the price of knowing. The scrolls, the books, the vaults, they weren't passive. They were infections. Living, breathing organisms made of thought. Parasites of comprehension. And I was the host. I began losing time. Waking in places I didn't remember traveling to. Speaking in voices not my own. Writing in languages I'd never studied. Once I found an entire room I had filled with diagrams and symbols etched into the walls with chalk ink blood. A map of thought, someone said, but no one else was there. I asked the last elder blind mute near death how to stop it. She laughed without sound. Then she handed me a mirror, and I saw them, the other versions of me, all layered within my reflection. One sobbing, one smiling, one screaming, one silent. Each a reader, each consumed, each still reading. That's when I understood the curse. It wasn't madness, not exactly. It was expansion. The human mind was never built to carry the weight of truth unfiltered. It was never meant to contain timelines, mythologies, impossible beasts, ancient spells, forbidden memories, and lost words all at once. But mine did. Because the library didn't want me to protect it anymore. It wanted me to become it. I was no longer a reader. I was being read. And the more I resisted, the more the scrolls called to me. They glowed when I passed, hummed when I slept, moved when I turned my back. One night I awoke, standing over the Codex of No Names. It was open. My name was written on the first page, and the last. I tried to run, but you cannot run from memory. I tried to forget, but the more I tried, the more the scrolls remembered for me. The final fracture came when I opened my mouth to speak and only dust poured out. Dust shaped like letters. I had lost language, not the ability to read or write, but the ability to contain words. They passed through me now. I was no longer the gatekeeper. I was the gate, and others were approaching. They came to me for knowledge, for answers, for power, but I no longer had any to give. Only echoes, only fragments, only the voice of the library speaking through me. Sometimes I wonder if I am still me. If this voice you hear, this story you follow is truly mine. Or if I am just the library dreaming itself into a new form. A new keeper. A new reader, because every book must be opened eventually. And every reader eventually must be read. The curse is not punishment. It is continuation. The scrolls will survive. The vault will persist. But me, I will forget myself. Because knowledge does not preserve the self. It devours it. And in the silence that follows, the pages will turn themselves. They never truly burned. That's what I finally understood. For centuries, we were told that the great Library of Alexandria vanished in flame, that its knowledge was lost, its scrolls reduced to ash. But fire was only the distraction. The truth was far more careful, far more intentional. The scrolls were moved. Not all of them, many were indeed sacrificed to protect the rest. But the most dangerous, the most precious, the most alive, were hidden. And not just beneath the sands of Egypt. They were scattered, smuggled in the bellies of ships that never returned to port. Carried by silent monks across collapsing empires. Buried beneath temples that were never marked on any map. Sealed behind false walls in cities that now go by different names. The vaults were never singular. Alexandria was the beginning, not the only. Each vault contained a seed, and each seed grew its own keeper. I am not the last. Nor was I ever the first. I see them now through dreams, through ink, through faint pulses in time. The child in Morocco, who speaks to books no one else can see. The old woman in Istanbul who hums ancient equations in her sleep. The librarian in Sao Paulo whose mirror has no reflection. The silent boy in Kyoto whose drawings come alive under moonlight. They are not coincidences. They are echoes of the same knowledge, the same burden, the same legacy. The scrolls call to those who can bear them, not perfectly, not forever, but long enough to keep the cycle unbroken. And you reading this now, have you not felt it? That strange pull toward forgotten stories. That chill when you open a book and realize the words feel older than time. That dream you had once of a room you've never seen, filled with books whispering your name. That is not imagination. That is remembrance. Somewhere a scroll is waiting for you, buried beneath a library, folded inside a cathedral, locked in a vault, misfiled in a box labeled "Do Not Open." And it knows your name, because legacy is not about preservation. It is about transmission. The knowledge that cannot die must move, silently, carefully, through those who dare to carry it. And though I have nearly forgotten who I was, I know what I am. A vessel, a whisper, a page still turning. I leave this record not as a warning, but as a signal. The books were never meant to stay in one place. They migrate, they adapt, they choose. You may have already touched one. A journal you found in a secondhand shop. A document on your computer you don't remember downloading. A single phrase that won't leave your head though you've never heard it spoken. The legacy of Alexandria is not a building. It is a network of memory, living, breathing, disguised as myth. It hides in story, in language, and dreams. Because what cannot be destroyed must become invisible. So where are the books now? Everywhere. In the hands of poets who write in riddles. In the voices of singers who hum forgotten scales. In the eyes of readers who blink twice when they see a phrase that feels too familiar. And sometimes, just sometimes, in the silence between pages. I do not know how long I have left. I feel the scrolls fading from me now, as if preparing to move on. But I do not fear it, because I know you're listening. And if you're listening, you're already remembering. So go, dig, read, forget, and remember again. When the time comes, a book will find you. And when it does, open it slowly. Whisper your name to it. Then listen closely. Because somewhere across time, across shadow, we are all still reading. And the library was never truly gone.